Hello and welcome back to my channel. I hope you are doing well. This video, we are going to be talking about my positive, in hindsight, induction story, because before I gave birth, I very much had a vision that I would potentially have a water birth and see how I went, maybe have an epidural. That plan, and as someone who loves having a plan, did not go to plan, which everyone says when it comes to birth, have no plan. Have kind of a idea of what you might like, but don't be too caught up on a plan. And to be fair, I wasn't. I knew that things could change. I was very open to things changing, and I wasn't dead set on that water birth. I just thought it'd be something that I would like to experience. So let me rewind, as I ended up having an induction 3 weeks early, and I hadn't come across anyone, none of my friends who had had babies had had that experience before. So I was a little bit apprehensive and I was very overwhelmed when I first found out. So if we rewind to 34 weeks, which is when I had a standard scan/checkup, and they do the thing, especially in the UK, I'm based in London, where they measure your bump using a handheld measuring tape, which to me seems very outdated, but that's the way they do it. And so there are likely going to be discrepancies between one measurement to the other, because it's ultimately down to the person who is doing the measuring as to what the reading is. There's no logging of it on a computer, there's no machine that they use, it's just literally like one of those IKEA measuring tapes. That is what they use. So they did that at 34 weeks, and he was, looking to be in a relatively good size, slightly on the smaller size, but my bump was always quite small for whatever reason. So that was at 34 weeks. Went back in at 36 weeks, once again, for a standard routine checkup. And they measure your bump. Again, once again, it's that handheld measuring tape. It's not using a, what are they called? The sort of machines where they look on your tummy. Not one of those. At that 36-week appointment, the bump, or him, my bump, hadn't really grown. And so she said, I'm not really concerned because he could be in a different position. He might have dropped. It might be that there was, my measurement versus the last person who did it, you were out by like a centimetre, which in the grand scheme of things is a large amount given the sort of size of the bump. It's all kind of relative. So she was like, I'm just going to send you to have a scan so that we can do a very accurate reading of your bump size. So I wasn't too concerned, because I was like, I know that this could change. And actually at my, I think it was 28-week appointment, the same thing had happened, where the bump was kind of showing quite different sizing versus what they thought it would be. And it turned out that it was absolutely fine. And actually it was just probably some change in movement from him. Obviously as my body grows, then things move around. So went into that appointment on that same day at 36 weeks. And they were kind of doing quite a lot of checks. When you're sort of there taking a little bit longer than you would think to measure all the different limbs, try and get into different positions, almost to try and override the feeling that maybe actually there is some sort of, anomaly here, like things aren't looking exactly as they should. So they did that, and then they were like, actually, yeah, he hasn't really grown to the extent that we would have expected. I can't remember the exact details, but it was very, very small from those last 2 weeks, which they would have thought by this point he would be growing at quite a kind of faster rate. So I was like, okay, interesting. But like they could hear his heartbeat. He had a healthy heartbeat. Everything was looking as it should. He was just measuring on the smaller size for 36 weeks. So they said, right, we're going to send you upstairs and we're going to do I think it's called TGC, could be wrong, something like that, monitoring, which is 30 minutes on, or up to 30 minutes, where they put the one monitor on your stomach to measure baby's heart rate. And then they also measure any signs of movement, so if you're having any contractions, and I think they also measure my heart rate. So we did that and everything looked fine, but they then did analyse the sizing, and they said he is on the smaller side. So we're just going to go away, I'm going to speak to the doctor, and we'll come back and kind of let you know what we think is going to be the best plan. Waited in the waiting room. Obviously I was a little bit nervous, but at the same time I knew that he was happy and healthy. He had a really strong heartbeat, and everything kind of from his like developmental side of things, i.e. like all his limbs and everything were there and as they would imagine. So then we got called into the doctor, and it was at that point, bearing in mind this is 36 weeks, so 4 weeks ahead of when I was kind of expecting to even have any signs of labour. The doctor, who was a junior doctor, essentially told us that because of his size and because of the lack of growth over those past 2 weeks, they would really encourage that he gets out by 37 weeks. So this was 36 weeks plus 3 days. And so 4 days time would have been 37 weeks. This was on a Friday, and then Tuesday would have been 37 weeks. So this was all told to us like after going in for a kind of standard checkup appointment, not what we were expecting to hear. So I immediately thought, oh my God, like I want to have a C-section then. I don't know why my mind went to that point. I kind of thought, if this is going to happen before I'm ready, then maybe it's just easier to get him out with a C-section. I wasn't anti C-sections, but at the same time, in my head, I was like, maybe this is the best option because there's no risk of anything going wrong. Maybe it's just a bit more of a controlled environment, like if he's not growing properly. So that was like my initial kind of panic reaction. And she talked us through why she would recommend a vaginal birth versus a C-section. And ultimately, if I wanted a C-section, I wouldn't be able to pre-book it in because they were so booked up in advance, basically, and it would have to be deemed an emergency C-section, and so they couldn't guarantee to give me one, which also kind of annoyed me because I was like, I was under the impression that you got to choose if you had a C-section or not, but she was kind of suggesting that I didn't really have much of a choice. And she did explain the benefits of a vaginal birth, especially at like a kind of early stage. So at 37 weeks, they are still full term, but I think they call it preterm. So you're not premature, but you're preterm, but you are full term in the sense that everything has kind of developed as it should. You'll just grow bigger and stronger those extra 3 weeks that you stay in the womb. So we went home. Obviously, I was a bit panicky, a bit overwhelmed, and it was a lot to process. My husband and I did a lot of like ChatGPTing when we got home, a lot of research and reading on like being born at 37 weeks, vaginal delivery. That was it. The doctor did explain that a vaginal delivery would be much more favourable because by the baby passing through the birth canal, it gives him a chance to kind of get rid of any excess liquid which would be in their lungs, which all babies have, and it's sort of more of a calmer slash slower entrance into the world, whereas a C-section at that age can be a bit more, there can be a few more issues, especially around their like breathing, because if they haven't got rid of all that liquid in their lungs, then they might need a bit of assistance with breathing, which could mean that they have to go to NICU, which I really didn't want. So anyway, after that initial shock, I then wrapped my head around the fact that actually a vaginal birth, which is always what I had in mind, would definitely be the best option. It was just suddenly a lot to come to terms with, that in literally 3 or 4 days time, I'd have to go in and have this would be happening. I'm someone who's very organised, so I kind of had everything that we needed at home, so that wasn't really a concern. It was just like wrapping my head around the fact that he was coming early January rather than end of January. I hadn't even started my mat leave. I had client calls booked in for that week, like that following week. I wasn't planning on signing off for another week off work anyway. Alas, the world had different plans. So we were booked in for Tuesday. I had to go in on the Saturday, Sunday and Monday, so following the news that we were given on Friday, to have like routine monitoring on that like TCG, whatever it's called, monitor, just so they could kind of keep tracking that he was fine. So that was obviously quite anxiety inducing as well, like travelling to the hospital on the Saturday, Sunday and Monday, having this monitoring, which was only about 20 minutes in the end, and then like anticipating what that would be. And they were basically just checking for his movement, and they always say obviously towards the end of the pregnancy, like make sure that you are aware of their movements shouldn't slow down. So then you become more paranoid, like is his movement slowing? Is it comparable to yesterday? Is it more? Is it less? Like, you know, I just kept kind of overthinking things. But anyway, that was all fine. So I was booked in on Tuesday to have an induction. Quick sip of coffee. Have an induction. And I weirdly then became quite calm because I thought, actually, as someone who loves to be in control, whether that's a good thing or not, I suddenly realised I had a lot more control in this environment and under these circumstances than waiting for labour to happen spontaneously. Now, I totally appreciate that him being in for an extra 3 weeks is ultimately like would have been the best outcome. But I felt very confident that he was fully developed, he was happy and healthy, had a really strong heartbeat. They wouldn't have recommended that I had the induction at 37 weeks if they didn't think it was the right option. So I felt calm because I was like, actually, at the end of the day, there's going to be 2 routes to this birth. Like, I know that within 48 hours of being induced, or maybe 72, but 48 hours, I would have a baby and I'd be in hospital. I wasn't able to leave once I went in. And it was actually a very controlled environment versus people who have had like, one of my friends yesterday gave birth and she had a 46-hour labour at home, and it was like ultimately very positive, but it was a long process, whereas mine, as I will go on to explain, was very quick. So fast forward to Tuesday, we were booked in at 10, went into the hospital. I was put into, I think it was called like a prenatal ward. So there were 6 other women in the ward, or 6 of us in total, and they were all there kind of for like early labour, whether that was like a concern for the baby or whether they were going to be induced, like that kind of thing. So it wasn't until 5 o'clock that I was then induced, because they were super busy and I wasn't really deemed a priority. It was gonna happen at some point that day, but I wasn't a priority. So the 2 options were either having a pessary, which is hormonal, and kind of like a small little, almost like a coil that they just put up your vagina, or a balloon, which is, they put that non-hormonal, and the idea is that it kind of stretches your cervix. Now, they checked my dilation when it went like at 5 o'clock, and I was already 1.5 centimeters dilated, which she was quite surprised by, because I was obviously 3 weeks until I was 40 weeks anyway. And that meant I could have the pessary. Now, the reason why I went for the pessary, even though it was hormonal, is because I was like, ultimately, the reason why I'm here is to go into labour. And the pessary is more guaranteed because it has that hormone that is going to kickstart labour. Whereas the balloon, I could have had it in for 24 hours, which you have to have it in for that long, taken it out and nothing could have happened. And then it would basically be like another 24 hours before anything did. Now, normally with a pessary, you have it in for 24 hours, but I had it in at 5 o'clock. Hello, mister. Got my little buddy here. I had it in at 5 o'clock. My husband and I went for a lovely walk by the river, Chelsea, over the bridge. Then we went to Pizza Express and had supper. I wanted something kind of relatively simple, but also like nice and tasty. Went for supper at Pizza Express, couldn't feel anything. Didn't hurt at all when they put it in. They kind of do like an examination, but I mean, yeah, it wasn't painful at all. And then I came back to the hospital. My husband didn't stay that night. We always knew that that was going to be the plan, because there's only like a chair that he could have slept on. And we thought it's better that you go home, 20 minutes drive, get a good sleep, come back in the morning, and then you'll have like energy to support me. So he left at about 10 p.m. About 11 p.m. I started feeling contractions. Now these were kind of like period-like cramps. I don't get painful periods, but I know that kind of period cramps feel like this. So light cramps, manageable, not a big problem, but they kind of got quite a lot stronger fairly quickly. And this is all because the pessary is kind of basically bringing on labour unnaturally, i.e. it's got a hormone in it that is putting your body into labour. Got to about midnight and I was like, okay, this is getting quite painful. Got some paracetamol from the nurse. Obviously that didn't really do anything. And then had, I think it's called like codamine or something. It's not codeine, but a sort of variation of a painkiller that you can alternate with paracetamol. So I had that every like 2 hours later. Wasn't really making any difference. I was kind of just like trying to breathe. Bearing in mind this was now 1 a.m. So I didn't sleep at all, just because it was like on my mind, and then you kind of know that there's like a bit of a rhythm there coming. Hadn't messaged my husband because I was like, he's gonna be asleep. Don't really want to concern him, like I'm fine for now. Then it got to kind of 2-3 o'clock and I was like, this is quite uncomfortable, like lying on my side, like rubbing my stomach. Nothing was really helping. So it got to 5 a.m. I was like, right, this is a bit silly that I'm like suffering here on my own. So I called my husband and I was like, yeah, things are getting like quite painful, quite uncomfortable. Like I think you should come in. So he came in. I had managed to get my hands on a TENS machine the night before. One of my friends said, oh, I was induced at like 39 weeks. I use a TENS machine, it really helped. And I'm on this like local WhatsApp group for like mums, which I'd sort of joined in anticipation a little bit early, posted in it, and someone literally like 5 minutes down the road had one, was like, I've got one, it's brand new, you can borrow it. So went to pick up the TENS machine. I started using that, which definitely helped. It was kind of more of a distraction rather than like a pain relief, but the idea is that the sort of zap and sensors helps to distract you from your pain in your like womb area, uterus, whatever it is. So I was using that, had it on like boost mode the whole time. Then at probably around, and I should say with the pessary, that you can't check how dilated you are. So the idea is that you keep it in for 24 hours, then you take it out, and hopefully by that point you've dilated to the point where you can kind of you know, go to the labour ward and ultimately start potentially pushing once you get to 10 centimetres. So I couldn't ever get checked. So I didn't know how effective the pessary was, whether it was kind of working or not, even though it definitely felt like, you know, the contractions were very much there. So I said to the midwife, like, it's getting quite intense. Like, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to last 24 hours. Like, there's no way, basically, I can last 24 hours. Bearing in mind, it had only been in this point by, how long would it have been? So 5 p.m. So sort of 12, 14 hours. She was like, do you want to try gas and air? I was like, yeah, why not? And I was a bit nervous about gas and air because I thought it'd make me feel nauseous. Like a lot of people say it did. It didn't. I think I wasn't like fully inhaling the gas because I was a bit nervous, but I was deep breathing out the whole time. I was like really just focusing on my breathing. Deep breath in, exhale out for longer. Like that's just what I was doing, honestly, for hours and hours and hours, which definitely helped, as well as just trying to stay like really calm and present in the moment. So used gas and air, didn't really help. I mean, I was still using it. And then I think it got to about 11 a.m. and I was like, right, I need to have this taken out because it's like getting unbearable. So I went to the loo. I should say this time, throughout this whole time, I had that monitor on my stomach because they wanted to make sure that, like, obviously with being induced kind of unnaturally, they want to check baby's heart rate, they want to check your contractions, so that I could see that all happening on the screen. And there were a couple of times when I was having these contractions and his heart rate was dipping, which is really normal because it's kind of the reaction to your body like contracting and then the baby kind of reacting to that. So they weren't concerned, but they were just kind of keeping an eye on it. So anyway, she was noticing that and she was like, okay, like the baby's fine, but we're just going to keep an eye on his heart rate because obviously he is little, and if this happens too many times, then we probably want to like think about a different strategy. So I went to the loo. The pessary actually then came out, which can happen because it's got like a string that's like coming out like a tampon. So if you wipe, then it can pull it out. So it came out and I went back and said, look, it's actually come out. And she was like, do you know what? That's probably a good thing. Like I've looked at your readings again and I probably would have recommended that we had it taken out anyway, just because of his heart rate that was sort of a little bit like fluctuating. So it came out. She could then check how dilated I was. And I was over 4 centimetres, like 4.5 centimetres, which was really good news because that meant I could go to the labour ward. And she was like, look, we're just going to keep monitoring your heart rate and baby's heart rate because of these kind of like fluctuations that we've seen. If I have to pull the emergency cord or button, don't be alarmed, but a lot of people are going to run in and it's just that I can get a doctor's opinion, like in case I think things are kind of going in a slightly, I don't think she used concerning, but like in a certain direction. So I was like, okay, like very calm. I knew this could happen. It happened to friends of mine. I'd like visualized it happening. And then within like 30 seconds, she pulled the emergency cord and then like probably like 8 people in scrubs like ran into my section on the ward. I was still in the ward at this point. And this lady was like, hi, Nicola, I'm Alice. Like I'm one of the doctors here. We're just going to check baby's heart rate. And what was like really anxiety inducing was because I was constantly being monitored and you see the like graph of the heart rate and the contractions on the screen to your right. At a couple of times the monitor had like moved slightly, which basically meant that it lost contact with his heart rate. Because obviously if it's not on his heart, then it's not reading the heart rate. And in my head, I was like panicking, being like, oh my God, his heart has stopped. Like that was my immediate thought. So I was trying not to look at the graph. My husband was looking at the graph, trying to stay calm and like not tell me anything. But it also meant that he could see where my contractions were. And so hopefully was like able to realize, okay, it's kind of in line with her contractions. Anyway, within 30 seconds of her coming in and like them, like all the scrubs team are by her, and me thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be wheeled to like surgery and have a C-section. She was like, oh, it's back. It's all fine. And was like super calm. And I was like, oh my God, just like keep breathing. She's like, we're just going to keep monitoring it. But the good news is you're 4 centimetres, so we can take you to labour ward and a room has just become available, which is very lucky because if it wasn't available, we would have kind of kept you here waiting until it was. So I had to walk from the labour ward to from the prenatal ward, I think it was called, to the labour ward. That's where you go to, where I went to my own room. Walking there was a challenge because the contractions were so intense. And like I couldn't really do anything when the contraction came, but like stand there, and it felt like like my body was just like convulsing and like wanting to curl over because of the intensity. And I think that's the word I'd use, is like intensity rather than pain. Like, it's not a stabbing sharp pain, it's just takes over your body. It's like a huge surge, and it's like that 20 seconds in the build up, 20 seconds where it's really intense, and then 20 seconds down. It kind of like repeats like that. So I couldn't talk to my husband, I couldn't talk to anyone. Got to the labour ward, had told them by this point that I wanted an epidural. I was like, do you know what? Like, I just want to feel as calm as possible. There's no way that I cannot do it without an epidural. And I think because I was induced, everything was just very accelerated. Like, people are normally labouring at home for like 12 hours before they even come into the hospital, whereas this was had all happened within 12 hours. Went to my labour room, was waiting for the guy to come and do the epidural, the anaesthetist. That was fine, like it took like 30 minutes. I managed to stay still. I was like, just focus, because if you can't stay still, they can't put the anaesthetic in. Did that, and then within like half an hour, the pain started to wear off. So it wasn't immediate, but it was definitely like, okay, this is becoming from unbearable to slightly unbearable. And then within sort of 30 minutes of them putting it in, I was like super calm. I was on the bed, I was chatting, I was showing the midwife like some of my wedding photos. She was amazing. Like, all my experience at Chelsea and Westminster was really, really positive. Like, all the care I got was amazing. And that was about 1 o'clock. She then checked how dilated I was, and I was 10 centimetres dilated. So I'd gone from like 4 centimetres to 10 centimetres in like 2 hours, which I'm pretty sure is very, very fast. So we had to then wait an hour for the epidural to kind of settle and kind of everything to be in me, I guess. Hadn't eaten anything or slept. Keep bearing in mind, like, I first started feeling contractions at 11 p.m. Couldn't sleep, didn't have any appetite. And then one of the kind of side effects of the epidural was like nausea. It wasn't like, oh my God, I'm going to be sick. It was more, I didn't want to eat anything. Like, the thought of eating, like, just no. But I was like, I need to have some energy to be able to push this baby out. So I managed to have a few nuts and like a couple of bites of banana, and I took what they called like the electrolytes. I had an electrolyte. So, and I was like, that'll be fine. So then it got to like 2. I think these timings are more or less right, but 2 o'clock, an hour later, and she was like, right, we're ready to push. And when she checked my dilation, she could see his head was like right there. So I was like, he's fully down, his head's engaged. I knew he was like slightly smaller, so I was like, right, I've got this. And I thought with an epidural, you were lying down, which was one of the reasons why I didn't want an epidural, because I was like, surely the most natural way to give birth is kind of gravity to help pull you down. But I was actually sitting up on the bed, like the bed back was all the way upright, and then my legs were kind of in like foot rests. So I was sort of almost like in like a squatting position with my legs up. So she was like, yeah, right, we can start pushing. And they were really good at guiding me. She was like, I'm going to count down from 3, take a really big deep breath, and then like basically push for like 8, 7, 6, 5. They kind of count you down. Take a deep breath in and then go again kind of quite quickly after. So that was a strategy. And they were making like really encouraging noises. They were like, oh, that's a really good push. So that was like motivating as well. And I was just like in the zone, head down, focused. I couldn't feel anything because of the epidural. It wasn't like complete numbness. It was more just like I couldn't feel the pain, which also meant I couldn't feel the contraction. So they were the ones kind of looking at the screen on my monitor to still see like, okay, there's a contraction coming, like get ready sort of thing. And then at one point, when was that? Sort of about half an hour in, she was like, okay, the baby's head's here, but I want to make sure that we can get him out like as soon as possible, because his heart rate had been like up and down. We don't want him to get distressed, and then you have to go to surgery or theatre. So I'm going to get the doctor to come in to get her opinion on what she thinks the best strategy is. So the same doctor that had ran in her scrubs into the ward came in, and she basically said, look, I think forceps is going to be the best, kind of most guaranteed route out. Is that okay with you? And I was like, to be honest, like, I'm not going to disagree. Like, in your sort of NCT classes, you're always told, like, ask questions, understand what the kind of risks and benefits and pros and cons are. I was like, look, if that's what you think, like, I don't know, so fine. Obviously, I would have preferred not to have used that, but equally, she was like, it will literally just be this one last push. If you can give us a really good push, it will just be this one last one. So I was like, fine. She got out the forceps, which are huge, look like garden tools, big metal, like pliers basically, or like serving tongs. My husband was like right by me, and she was like, right, Rory, like maybe look away now, because she had to do the episiotomy. And yeah, I did the episiotomy. And I should say as well, they had to break my waters. My waters hadn't actually broken. So this was right at the beginning, before I started pushing. They just kind of, I started pushing. And then like 50 minutes in, the waters hadn't broke. And they thought that maybe that would happen. So they just popped it. That was all fine, like water gushed out. So anyway, had the forceps, did the episiotomy, couldn't feel anything. She was like, right, one last big push. Did one big push with the forceps, then the head came out, did another push, and he came out. So the whole pushing was 45 minutes. Which was amazing. And they put him straight on my chest. What I found then was like quite strange is you kind of have your baby on your chest, your legs are still in the stirrups, you still can't feel anything. You're like in complete disbelief and awe, like what's just happened, / it's completely surreal. And then she's still sort of doing her bits down there, because then you have to push the placenta out, which, I mean, she was literally like, okay, Nicola, a couple of pushes. I was just sort of did a little push and it kind of came out. So that's not a big deal at all. And then she had to stitch me up and everything. And that was that. So really it was a positive experience. I mean, obviously contractions are going to be intense. We all know that like labor is like the most incredible but demanding thing a woman human can do. I didn't know like relatively to other people how well I was like tolerating the pain. My thought around getting an epidural was like, in any other circumstance, like if you break your leg or you have like a migraine or whatever it is, you take painkillers to help you. So like, I'm not going to fight that. As amazing as it would be to kind of give birth naturally, like you don't get a medal for leaving the hospital, like when you leave the hospital, if you didn't use pain relief, and actually made my experience really pleasant. So I would 100% have one again. And then, yeah, I didn't have any complication with my episiotomy or my stitches. They were the ones that dissolved, so I didn't have to go in to have them taken out. We were able to stay in the labour ward in that room until 9 p.m, had some food, got a Deliveroo, and we just were like in love with our new son who was suddenly here. We stayed in the hospital one night in the labour ward and then we went home. So anyway, Mr. Man is starting to make a little bit of movement. So I'm probably going to wrap this video up here. But please drop any questions below about being induced, about epidural, about like early term labour, well not early term, but kind of pre-term labour. If I can give any advice or things that helped or things that I had like with me that were useful, I will obviously share them with you. Just pop them in the comments below. And thank you for watching. Should just say before I go, my Instagram account for motherhood is linked below, but it's at by Nicola Bethwaite, but I'll link it below. So make sure you come and join the community over there, and I will see you in the next video.